All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Finance and Appropriations Committee. Today is February the 9th. Somebody's birthday is today, I think. But today is February 9th. Glad to have you all here. Today we've got a very compact, robust schedule today. We'll be here for some time, but the information that we'll be getting today, everyone, is substantive. So just saddle in and prepare to learn quite a bit about where we are financially and where we're headed, more importantly, financially here in the city of Columbus City Schools. With that, let's take a roll.
Board Member Adair.
Present.
Board Member Brown.
Here in person.
Board Member Cole.
Present.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Ms. Johnson. Mr. Jordan. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller is joining us via Zoom, but he is not present to form a quorum, but you do have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. And again, thank you, Brother Miller, for joining us this afternoon. Glad to have you here. With that, can we have an approval of the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Without any due delay, we can go ahead and pass that.
I'll abstain.
Okay.
Wasn't there.
So then we technically don't pass it because we don't have a quorum if we have one abstention, yes?
That's not true.
No,
It's a point of clarification.
Oh, you threw me a Robert Rules of, where's my Robert Rules of Order fellow? He's not here yet.
I know we have a quorum in number, but
I don't think the abstention can count in favor of passage. It, in essence, is similar to a no vote.
mm-hmm.
So you have 3, but you need 4
To pass.
adopt the minutes, but we can push that off to the next meeting.
Thank you. With that, what we're going to do is readjust today's meeting a bit. We're going to kind of turn things around a little bit. In addition to that, the scheduled discussion around the quarterly review and update with WCBE, we're going to table that, move that for a future meeting. And I expect to hear great things about where we are with WCBE and, again, where we're headed. But we're going to start off today with the facilities capital budget request. So, whoever's starting that presentation off.
Alex Trevino will be making this presentation, and I'll just preface it with a couple of things. One, Alex, we're going to run your PowerPoint, but I think I'm going to have to be your slide advance mechanism, so we'll have to figure out how he communicates that to me. And secondly, we pulled this out of the budget presentations that you're going to hear later on because it's rather unique. You're going to hear in this proposal kind of a multi-year request, and this will also serve as a segue into the next item, which we've reordered, which is the PI levy discussion and recommendation. So with that, Alex, I don't know if you can see our screens, but just let me know when you want to go, and I think I can advance them for you.
Good afternoon, Alex.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this afternoon. So hopefully you're going to see a lot of continuity, continuation of the discussion that we had in January. So this is the proposed FY 2023 capital budget. Next slide, please. So just want to remind us that we're grounding all of these decisions in the district's goals, which are goal number 1, whole child focused. Number 2, equitable opportunities for all. Number 3, strong learning in communities in every region. And number 4, authentic engagement. And so kind of this is the why. Why is there the need for an FY 23 budget request? So I think everybody's familiar that we've had a very robust series of projects over the past approximately 5 years, spearheaded by Operation Fix-It. So I presented last month that we have essentially completed all of our Operation Fix-It projects, and we have basically spent down all residual funds in that particular fund. We also implemented facility task force projects. That was the Dominion, World Language, and Brookhaven projects. We've got about $2 million worth of work that we'll be executing over this coming summer 2022, but we've essentially spent down most of those funds. And then we are in the very last phase of contracting for our summer 2022 projects, which are all HVAC projects funded through the district's ESSER 2 fund. And so while that's very important work, it will essentially be finished at the end of this calendar year. So at this point, we do not have any funds to roll forward projects for summer of 2023. And so without any additional funds, all capital work will essentially come to a halt unless we're able to identify a source of funds. Next slide. So this is that request. So again, very much aligned with what I presented at the January FAC. So we are requesting a total of $40.7 million. You'll see that it's broken down into an FY22 amendment of $4.1 million and then an FY23 request of $36.6 million. And you'll see that the rationale for that under the highlights is that we really need to launch into this work immediately. So assuming that we are given approval to move forward with this, we need to get our first request for qualifications issued so that we can get our first design consultants on board. We need to get the first of those projects designed, which means we need to get those contracts in place. So that initial $4.1 million will essentially be our seed money. It will let us get at least some of our consultants in place to get work started. It will also pay for things like our printing and distribution of drawing costs, as well as costs for advertisements that are required as part of our ORC obligations to get the work started. The bulk of the funds, the $36.6 million, would be the FY23 request. Those funds would largely be paying for the construction work that we would be working towards, and the vast majority of this work would be summer of 2023 work. So then just to give you some highlights, again, the idea is that this work would really sustain our Operation Fix-It work that we've already picked up so nicely over the past 5 years. So continuation where we need it of HVAC, roofing, safety, fire alarm, asphalt type work. But as I presented last month, we also really want to launch into some new project types, ones that are going to be much more impactful for our students and our community. So everything from those classroom improvements we talked about, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, building envelopes, so looking beyond just that roof, but looking at any potential source of water intrusion, looking at that flooring, really trying to reset that visual when people walk into our facilities for the first time, looking at our athletics and our playgrounds, and then just some general renovations across the district. And then just some kind of additional highlights to wrap up the presentation this afternoon. So it also includes our first initiative to launch a long-range life cycle renewal planning effort. And this would be largely with contracted services. As I mentioned, it would also really give us the opportunity to sustain the momentum we've picked up over the past 5 years, so that we kind of, I know your treasurer will give you some details on this later, but we're really trying to plug a very short-term gap right now so that we can continue this work into the foreseeable future. And it would very directly fund those summer 2023 projects, which would also allow us to avoid accumulating more deferred maintenance. And it also gives us a pretty unique opportunity as we're continuing to develop the facility master plan to really make sure that we're dovetailing these projects nicely so that we're able to have good quality facilities across the district. And that completes the presentation that I have for you today.
Thank you, Mr. Trevino. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Got just a couple, and I see that this program has really worked in a very positive way, and we knew at the outset that the $500,000 wouldn't be enough on an ongoing basis. This proposal for an additional 40, which is, I don't know, you know the number, but my guess is it's somewhere between a half and 2/3
of a mill. Oh, 40 million. We generate about 12 million per mill, so this is equivalent to about 3 mills.
Okay. All right. But this will not get us to where we ultimately need to be. And
Correct.
What you're proposing then is that we phase this in very slowly and don't have more than we're going to be able to do in terms of the workload at any time. Is that right? Is that the thinking on this?
Yes, that's correct. This is this proposal is really a segue into permanent funding for capital improvements, which is my next presentation. But you're absolutely correct. It's a phase-in, as you see, about 4.1 million in the current fiscal year, then 36 million in the next, and then you're going to see that the PI levy is going to generate that I'm going to recommend to the committee, the PI levy that I'm going to generate, is going to provide funds over a longer period of time, which on average will pay for capital improvements that inflate over time. So I'll present that to you, but
Okay.
you are conceptually correct. This is a ramping up of a capital budget. These first two pieces, the 4.1 and the 36.6, will come out of the general fund. We will transfer those dollars into a PI fund, so they will be separate, so that you know you don't have to hurry up and spend them in one fiscal year. That's not how capital works. Alex does a lot of work when kids aren't in buildings. That's the summertime, and you pay bills all the. I mean, it's an ongoing process. So we want to set that aside in a separate fund in his own separate checkbook, I guess. Alex is the way we'll look at that, and that money will be be available to him regardless of the time period in which he spends it, as will the next PI levy.
And when we're saying capital improvements, what we mean is not only the large item purchases, but also the maintenance for those items, correct?
It's actually more actual physical assets that we'd be purchasing, whether it's I think we've got the large items, obviously roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, but you've also got things like in about 10 years, you're going to need some money for buses because you're going to run out of the 80 million. Those would go in there. Fleet replacement in general, but then you're also getting down into equipment, I would imagine, correct, Alex? Equipment and furniture?
Absolutely.
So he's talked about classroom furniture replacement. So it's not, for lack of better terms, it's not to put chair glides on chairs. No. It's to buy the chair in the first place. The maintenance would come out of the typical maintenance custodial budget on an ongoing basis.
But
is that fair, Alex?
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
So it's all of the items that we can schedule for replacement.
Yes.
And we know generally what the useful life will be.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any additional questions? Thank you again, Mr. Trevino. We can move on, Mr. Treasurer, to permanent improvement levy discussion.
Okay. The first couple of slides I'm going to bring up to you kind of is a repeat of what Alex said. I just wanted to remind you that back in January, Alex did do the presentation on our PI needs, and that's good. We can start. Yeah, there we go. So he did this presentation, the life cycle replacement and permanent improvement needs. And second slide gives you that context. We've 8.3 million square feet of academic space and 580,000 square feet of administrative space. I mean, this is a large district with lots of capital assets we have to maintain. And I stop on the next slide, the third slide, because what I did for my analysis of the PI levy need, he highlighted here 49.8 million on periodic annual renewals. So that's the number that we need to fund each year and find a funding source. So we currently have a $500,000 levy in place. And then I want to look at that number and inflate it over time, and then net out that current millage and say what's remaining that we have to fund. So if we could go to the next PDF that I want to share. It's a whole different PDF. We'll get there. There it is. And you have this in a sheet in front of you. As I mentioned, we generate 12.6 million per mill levied. And what I did was I took Alex's number of 49.8 as an annual need over there in the third column from the left. Started at 49.8 and just simply went out 25 years and used an annual inflation rate of 2%. The average annual need then is 63.8 million. We generate 4,557,000 a year from the existing PI levy, so the net amount I need to generate is 59.2 each year. I then did the cash flow because these are fixed amount levies. So when I look over that 25-year period, to meet that annual need on average of 63.8, if I generate from a 4.7 mil levy, just over 59 million, couple it with 4.5 from the other one, it will meet those ongoing expenditures. And you can see we're going to build a cash balance up front in our PI fund. But then over time, we begin to diminish that right around midway, about 14 years out. The expenditures then have grown to an extent that they're going to exceed the annual revenues coming in. And at the end of that 25-year period, it shows about 2 million remaining. But this is just an example of why we're going to fund a little bit more up front, because that dollar amount doesn't change, but our expenditures do increase. Kind of like what we face on the operating side. You know, our operating millage generates a static amount of dollars, and yet our expenses climb over time. So you see that we build a balance, and then you eat into that balance over time. You might ask, why did I pick 25 years? I think long term, you know, going to the ballot, let's get what we need for a long-term capital project. 25 years is about as long as a bond issue would be. And also, I thought about the kids and their life cycle. So the kindergartners that come in today, in about 12 or 13 years, they leave us, and then the next group of kindergartners and come in, and they're with us for 12 or 13 years. So I cover that life cycle of can I say, 2 generations of children in the district that will have these funds available to bring the facilities up to speed and hopefully maintain them. So that's how Alex and I worked together and prepared this. It would require a 4.7 mil PI levy. My recommendation to the committee today is that you adopt a resolution to recommend to the board that they consider placing the 4.7 mil PI levy on the ballot in November. And we'll leave it in their hands. The 3 of you and your 4 colleagues, leave it in your hands as to what exactly you end up doing. But from strictly a PI levy standpoint, somewhat in isolation here, this is what I believe we need. Absent, quite frankly, what we do with FMP. You need to have a capital budget to do this life cycle replacement. Next up, we'll talk later on about an operating levy in the FMP, but this piece right here, I'm of the opinion that it can stand alone regardless of what the other 2 pieces look like. As Board Member Brown aptly pointed out, we needed more than this back in 16 when we went on ballot, but for a variety of reasons, we chose to pare that down. But at this point, I'm asking the committee to consider adopting a resolution to ask the board to consider placing that kind of a PI levy on the ballot in November. That concludes this part of those 2 presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Are there any questions at this point? Just a very quick question for me. Can you talk about what the possible cost impact stressor may be on the taxpayer? Can you describe how leverage in this type of instrument for funding the district actually has, some major benefits? Can you talk about the benefits and, some of the other aspects of a PI?
The first thing that comes to mind is deferring maintenance, deferring replacement is always more expensive. That's the first advantage, that you provide these funds and they are a sustainable source of revenue to get into capital improvements and those life cycle replacements. It does provide some other opportunities for financing along the way, should we so choose. We can look at that absent other opportunities there. You can do some things on a pay-as-you-go basis for some really major renovations, but it depends upon what that long-term plan ultimately looks like each year as we go by. So that to me is the advantage is we're going to have to replace these things at some point in time. So it's better to have an ongoing investment in those capital replacement items.
So in short, it's just fair to say it's reasonable, it's responsible, it's proactive. It's actually taking a proactive step towards, sustainability for the district regarding our buildings and grounds.
I would say absolutely. I would go with the proactive approach to have this long-term plan in place. I think the benefits to the facilities that our children attend school in will be measurable, demonstrable, things that you can see and touch and feel. I will say this, I have a conversation with another professional that works in an ancillary business to school finance, and we were talking about some of the financing and levy opportunities that we're discussing here these past few months. And one of their parting comments to me was, if you could get that permanent improvement levy in place for Columbus schools, it would be the best thing that's happened to the district in terms of capital improvements ever. It is a long-term, sustainable funding source. And he said that would just be fantastic. So that's a outside third person kind of, I won't say disinterested party, but from their view, this will be a big, I haven't done any checking at what other districts have in the way of PI levies. Most of them do have some form of a PI levy to help with this. It also, now that I think about it, Chair Cole, notice that the first two pieces come out of the general fund. With a PI levy like this protects your general fund to a great degree. When I first got here, one of our budgeting objectives in order to keep the operating fund intact was to move as much as we can of capital type expenditures out and into a capital fund. Unfortunately, that capital fund didn't have a whole lot of money in it. But the idea was, let's get those out of the general fund and over here in a separate funding source. So it's separated, it's segregated, it's dedicated to capital improvements. This is just a continuation of that philosophy, to have that dedicated revenue source.
I thank you for that. I mean, just as a clear example, and then we'll move on, is the transition of $30 million that we made from the general fund to the capital to for those 6 school projects that we're trying to work on. So it's a perfect example, again, of how we protect the GF, general fund. So thank you for that.
Certainly.
Let's move right on to the non-personnel budget presentation.
Chair Cole?
Yes.
I asked, I proposed to the committee that they adopt a resolution to send to the board.
Yes.
Would that, if with all respect, would that be in order?
Yes, it would. Thank
you.
you. Thank you. I am so down the road right now, so forgive me, but thank you. Yes, I'd like to, is there anyone willing to offer a motion to move this presentation and this proposal forward to the Board of Education?
I'm, as a strong proponent of going forward this way and of using these kinds of funds in this manner, I'm happy to move that we pursue a permanent improvement levy and to recommend to the board that it place such a request on the ballot.
Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Green. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. We've done a lot of work for many years to get to this point, and this is very exciting. This is
a huge deal.
This is a huge deal. This is a huge deal, and I appreciate you all listening and asking questions and supporting the work that Alex and his team have done, and all the numbers that I've brought to you. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you as well. I just want to make sure I thank you and your team for the work that you guys have done, not just in this space, but also even the spaces of our busing. We've been able to create and leverage some very unique and innovative opportunities to help extend life and extend asset, capability on our part to be able to transport children, all of that good stuff. So I look forward to that 95%, Dr. James. We'll hear more about that later coming up, but I look forward to that 95%. So moving right along, we'll move into our non-personnel budget presentations.
We'll turn this over to our Executive Director of Finance, Mr. Gooding,
All right, thank
to
you,
lead the way.
Mr. Mahork. I'll introduce things and give Kira a moment to come up to the podium for the first presentation. This is, I believe, is our sixth time with this approach in our budget philosophy. That we've changed this back in 2014 when Stan and I both came into the district, I think within just several months of each other, and really turned the thought process around how we budget being not driven by the finances, but driven by the needs of the students in the district. It's taking the two various approaches and combining them, which is your strategic planning process, your financial planning process. What you have before you this evening is the non-personnel general fund requests by all of the chiefs that will be talking about the things that they want to do for kids and how it aligns to our district goals and guardrails. And it's the dollar amounts, the requests are driven by what we've identified what our kids need in the classroom, outside the classroom, in the facilities. And I think that's maybe a little bit of why we changed the what you'll see tonight in the business ops side just was a dollar amount that was there. That slide will change a little bit based on the conversations that we just had that Alex presented just a little bit ago. So you'll see a different slide in here, but this presentation changes because of the outcome of that conversation. Sorry, my screen went blank here real quick. So what we've done is the chiefs and the budget managers have worked very, very hard going through from step zero, if you want to think of a zero-based process, to identifying the needs and quantifying those into dollars that you'll see before you. So what we'll do is each chief will come up. Here is the agenda. We have them, they're listed alphabetical. But obviously it works out that the two biggest budgets that we have obviously are academic services and business and operations. So we have 1 hour and 25 minutes, I think, allocated here. So we're going to try to get through that quickly. I'm going to stop talking so they can do all the work and tell you all the great things that their folks are doing. So we got 20 minutes here for academics. Once Kira's done with her presentation, we'll keep moving this forward and have them go through. And then if you have any questions for them at the end of the presentation, we'll have that opportunity for you as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kira.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Might be close. Okay, so good afternoon, Chair Cole and members of the committee. Thank you for your time this afternoon. As academic services, we oversee pre-K through 12 content creation and alignment, program design, and the instructional models for staff and students across our educational continuum. And we're committed to our 3 board goals: strengthen reading proficiency, close opportunity gaps, and prepare our graduates. And so these budgets that we're going to talk about today, there are many, all aligned to these goals and to the core function of our office. And the first one up here is teaching and learning, and this budget supports our professional development for our teaching and learning, particularly our curriculum writers and members of that team, and also the day-to-day operations of that department. Our K-12 curriculum, you'll see an increase here in our 905 K-12 curriculum budget, and that's primarily due to the addition of the funding for the 6A iReady assessment suite, that's now coming out of our budget as opposed to performance. There are also increases on the secondary lines to support implementation of literacy across all our content areas, and smaller increases in our elementary lines to support the integration of SEL and culturally responsive practices into our content areas to align to all of our district goals and initiatives. 909, our ESL, this budget supports the supplemental resources and software licenses aligned with district adopted curriculum for our English language learning students. It's targeted professional development specifically to these sites and this team, and also interpreter services that support our buildings, our teacher teams, and also our other offices. This is our reading line. It primarily due to the there's an increase here primarily due to the additional purchase of the second grade foundations replacement consumables, along with the initial purchases for third grade implementation. In addition, we are purchasing Wilson, which is a supplemental resource for 4th and 5th grades as a Tier 2 resource. And another increase here in secondary funding, primarily to support professional development, professional development and in alignment to our literacy plan. Our social studies, the most significant increase in our 912 is from the increase in cost of supplemental resources studies weekly, specifically, which is the primary resource for elementaries, social studies, as well as additional resources that will support the integration of social studies in all of our content areas. This is a general academic services line, also targeting, this is really targets professional development for our leadership team across academic services, all of our supervisors, directors, executive directors, and then also any consultant services that might benefit the team. Early childhood education. This supports our collaboration and partnership with the Schoenbaum. We use their summer curriculum for our pre-K summer experience. Also, we've adopted pre-K On My Way curriculum for the 21-22 school years, and in response to that, teachers will continue to receive job-embedded coaching that will continue into next school year. Yep.
Child education piece.
This does not include Linden Park.
Okay.
I mean, we support Linden Park and resources there, but not, like, is your question about resources or the personnel?
It's really about, curriculum alignment and, additional human resources that we would otherwise appropriate to expand in that program and continuing to make it ours, continuing to broaden it.
So certainly the alignment of resources is still here, but nothing regarding personnel is represented here.
Gotcha.
Correct. And they also have a school budget to run that center as well. So
Yep.
these are just primarily the departments that you see. But for Linden Park, they do have a school budget that helps them with the non-personnel piece of the operations.
Thank you.
Our professional learning and licensure, so this supports state mandated training and credentialing required for teachers, counselors, principals, and our resident educator program. It also allows for general increase of goods and services as it relates to this department, and outreach courses offered through OSU for our staff as well. Math. The most significant increase in our 919 K-12 math line is to support the use and the expansion of technology to support math instruction, algebra readiness, and advanced math, as well as professional development to support the implementation of evidence-based practices with fidelity. Yep.
I want to say in that reading piece, I don't know, I can't remember if it was over $1 million or is it over $2 million investment in our literacy efforts. It seems as though, at least the history of the district has been that there's been an equal look as much at literacy as well as numeracy, that we've both held them in very high priority. Is it just that space doesn't need as much attention or investment? It just seems very small.
Yeah, so we'll see a bigger general increase in what's called our textbook line, and you're going to see a big increase there that encompasses all of our content areas.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, science. Here we see an increase to purchase Study Weekly Science as a supplementary science resource, and this we will be in need until the elementary science resource is adopted. There are also smaller increases to support expansion out Spruce Run programming, STEM robotics program, and increased professional development to support both those things. Career and technical education is expanding programming throughout the middle schools, which will increase program costs. Costs of nearly all goods and services that are used by the CTE department have increased in the last 18 months, and this is also a response to that. This program also is supported by grant opportunities as well when we are thinking about general budgets. Our summer school or summer experience, we're going to continue opportunities for students to access non-grad programming and build the necessary skills for continued success, especially around with a focus of whole child. Continued collaboration with partners around the city to engage in learning experiences, and this also supports our current, some of the work and extension we're doing with our Pathways Express program. Teachers that participate in summer experience or summer school also receive professional development, and that's another piece here reflected. Increase material lines to ensure quality resources that are in the hands of our students so that they continue to have those problem-based learning experiences in our summer programming. Increase summer experience partnerships will continue with the PASS Foundation, WOSU, Super Art League, Corda, to ensure a variety of learning experiences in the future. Here we see an increase which is really due to the increase of new speech pathologists in our district that support our students pre-K through grade 12. We also calibrate audiometers. This is not new. We do this every year. And general technology support for our students that have multiple needs when it comes to communication and accessing the curriculum, all supported by that department. Unified Arts, we see another increase in funding to support program growth for district musical instruments 4 through 12 and the repairs and purchase of those. Increase to support technology and digital learning for students in music, visual art, theater, and dance in grades K through 12. Also professional development to support these expansions and this programming, and the continued support for the growth of resources for students in the arts and physical education in grades K through 12. Library services. The increase in this budget will allow us to replace books, over 16,000 books that were lost or not returned during remote learning. And additional funding will also allow us to strengthen the inclusivity of our library offerings so that they better represent our students in the classroom. Here's our big one. So an increase on our textbook budget is reflective of the 5-year adoption cycle. In fiscal year 23 is an increase of $7.9 million due to the funding needed for year 3 payment for our K-12 ELA and math adoption, year 2 of secondary social studies and science adoption, year 1 of K through 12 fine arts and K through 12 world language adoption, and the adoption of elementary social studies and science curriculum resources. That was a lot. Career advising services, college advising in every high school, including I Know I Can and partners like AmeriCorps, college guides in every middle school and high school. The use of Naviance, parent engagement workshops, and again, continued professional development. We see a significant increase in special education, and in part this is due to increased opportunities for our students to attend Lifetown, where they can build the necessary life skills through authentic experiences. Increase material lines for each disability category to ensure that we're aligning the resources purchased to the needs of those students. And that is where we saw a big difference this year when we budgeted that way. And then, of course, professional development for staff as it relates to the 11 district plan and overall compliant federal and state compliance. Here we have gifted services, continued and increased opportunities in collaboration and partnership with district partners for Columbus Gifted Academy, purchase of curricular materials for identified students, and curricular materials for talent development.
So we've seen just a bit of a drop from 22 to what you're proposing in 23. Given our discussions on F&P, possibility, and the recommendation by the community as well to increase capacity in this particular area, and among others, are you guys looking at that moving forward?
So we are looking at that exactly, and I had that called out as a note for this as well.
Okay.
And that was the drop we're seeing in 22 to 23 is due to specific resources that were purchased for Gifted Academy that will not need renewed or replenished or replaced. So that's where we see that small difference. We
And that's
have
because it just doesn't have to be, or?
Right, right. It's not an identified need. We have accounted for what we hope to be an increase of students in our programs and benefiting from that program.
Thank you. I look forward to learning more.
Great. Higher education partnerships. Here we see tuition for college credit plus tuition, increased number of students. Obviously increases our tuition costs. CCP textbooks, increased number of students. District supported cohorts, and then the expansion of higher education partnership initiatives. That we are looking to expand. There'll be an expansion of summer bridge initiatives building on Teaching Academy with Otterbein University. This is our peer assistance and review, or PAR program, and this really focuses on the general increase in the cost of goods and services, and the support for that program and those teachers. World Languages Department, an increase here in funding will support the expansion of the immersion programming K through 8, as well as professional development for world language teachers to support the implementation of their programming and resources, and hopefully increase the number of students earning the graduation seal for biliteracy. Learning technology, and this is a relatively new office, and the budget for here is to expand features within Canvas to support implementation, professional development, including the Canvas catalog, cloud service, and the repository, to provide 24/7 Canvas technical support to teachers, and expanding analytic features to inform implementation strategy and target teacher support.
The world languages piece.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a reflection, is that slight increase a reflection of just increase of cost of something, or, an added investment to, again, work towards building greater capacity with world languages?
And
Thank you.
opportunities. Oh, geez.
You're
Okay.
at learning technology.
I'm gonna do all of them.
979.
I had one more left with Blend Ed. If someone wants to pull up Blend
Oh,
Ed.
980 now?
980 was last.
That was,
Yeah,
you
blend
passed
that.
it.
Sorry, everyone. I'm not everyone.
Mine is acting funny.
So Blend Ed is we know that that's our primarily online instruction with some face-to-face opportunities, and this is staffing and programming is supported through ESSER, which is why right now we don't have why it's at 0. Any other academic services questions before I transition to Dr. James?
If there are none, thank you so very much for your presentation,
you.
your responses.
Great job.
Good afternoon, Dr. James.
Good afternoon, Chair Cole, members of the committee. We'll go into our business and operations budget. So first of all, in my conversations with Dr. Dixon, one of the, of course, goals of the organization as being a student-focused organization is to translate that into business and operations. And since coming here, I've had a chance to observe a lot of things, deal with a lot of issues and problems. So hopefully we'll get to an understanding of how we're going to prioritize our students. I don't have to review the capital improvements. Again, that is, I think, one of the ways of we can focus on our students. We have a lot of infrastructure here. I believe at last count over 10 million square feet of building space, both academic and non-academic, that we are going to have to address over the next 25 years. The first area I'd like to talk about is the chief operating officer's budget. That's Maurice Oldham. That covers some of the performance management support, professional development activities for the division, and also memberships in some professional organizations. There's also a few areas or budget line items that will cover equipment for the office, primarily located on 17th Avenue, who supports the departments that are located there. And no change from last year to this year in terms of that request.
36, capital improvement slide.
That we already covered that.
Yeah, and this is, our discussion about capital improvements is rather fluid. Weeks ago when we began this presentation and Scott had everyone go through their budget presentations, Alex had put this together and made a 23 request of $58 million to jumpstart that program. Since then, we got to the point where we were this afternoon where he's making a 22 request coupled with a 23 request at a smaller dollar amount as that got refined. So what we see here is that 23 request is really what we did before, which was the 40 million. Okay, so that slide just is, it just wasn't updated because we're doing a multi-year request in terms of capital improvement.
No worries. I just want to make sure that there's still opportunity to at least transparently have that conversation.
There is one thing to point out about that slide. Notice that the FY21 expended 176,000. Pretty small capital improvements budget out of the general fund because he had Operation Fix It, some other things going on outside that. So in keeping with our moving capital expenditures out of the general fund, that's why 21 looks like that. Wasn't anything budgeted in 22, but we're looking forward to 23, and that's what we put together. But we refined that, and that's why we did the presentation first.
No, thank you so very much. I just want to make sure we're talking about it publicly as much as we're having a inner circle conversation.
The next department is information technology, and you'll see a fairly large request for fiscal year 23. And what's driving that, number one, is the purchase of additional Chromebooks to replace those that are going to come out of circulation for our students. And if I'm not mistaken, that's almost $8 million in Chromebook replacements that we're anticipating. Some of the other areas in technology services are going to be some upgrades to our district servers that host much of our software, and some additional software replacements for cybersecurity insurance, the things that keep our network systems up and running at the Kingswood location and throughout the district. Then
Piece I want to call out as well. The budget managers were very intentional and thoughtful in putting the request together. Some of these things, especially with the technology request, is there are things that are in the works for application for use against our ESSER funds. So they're in here because those applications have not been approved yet, the requests. So there is the opportunity that if we find a place where it fits into the use of those ESSER dollars, we're going to use those. So that may reduce these requests going forward depending on if those projects get approved or not. So there's a lot of those pieces that are in there. The budget managers were very thoughtful and intentional, like I said, putting them there just in case, because if they're not approved, then the only way to fund it is here. But if those projects are funded and approved, then we'll reduce those requests here at the later stage in time.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
In addition, under technology is also our network and telecommunication services. One of the areas driving that increase in the budget is the provision of hotspots for our students who don't have internet access. That is a substantial part of the increase. Also, the enhanced availability of our voice over IP systems and doing some upgrades and changes there. Regarding our network in terms of telecommunication services.
Quick question. There's
Yes.
a grant, and I cannot recall the name of it. The federal grant that appropriates funds towards this specific area for school districts. Somebody might be able to refresh my
E-rate.
E-rate. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Are we still leveraging those dollars in this space?
Yes, part of the budget includes the E-rate consultant that helps us with those applications.
Okay, thank you.
Next is our favorite transportation services. That budget is about the same, and I'll explain some of the issues there. Just a little increase. Some of that will drive this driver recruitment piece that we're talking about in terms of trying to focus on getting that 95% on-time bus arrival. There are a few things that drive some of our current challenges there. The number of employees that we have who can drive buses and trying to get replacements and subs. Also, doing an upgrade on our routing software that can make it more efficient. The other thing that we're looking at is the potential for having vans transport some of the possible win-win areas, because they typically will have smaller numbers of students that we might be able to put on a van. And because there are longer distances outside of the main contiguous area of the city and the district, it can help us provide more seats on buses and hopefully run those more efficient. So we're working with transportation on that. And also, we just went over the audit from our internal auditor's office to look at some of the processes for transportation. And so some of those things that we will be looking at are included in this budget for fiscal year 23. Fleet Services, of course, maintains all of our vehicles. So again, because of some capital money that's been invested to help pay for replacement buses, but we have to provide the maintenance and the upkeep of those vehicles. Part of the request here is a $500,000 to replace the lift at our one of our maintenance complexes for transportation. That will be implemented this year. And also, part of Fleet Services to replace and prioritize some custodial services equipment in terms of vehicles that they use as well. Buildings and grounds. One of the areas that Dr. Dixon and I discussed was improving their professional development. So there is some funding in there, increased funding for that. Of course, they're concerned with providing a safe and comfortable environment for our students and staff. Also mitigating a lot of the risk in terms of the premature failure. And we talked about that at the last FAC in terms of this run to fail process, and we're trying to move away from that. And also expand and improve our snow removal processes at our buildings. There's also part of that increase is software in terms of monitoring our buildings and making some enhancements there. So we're informed a lot faster about system failures in our facility. Environmental health and safety, basically just inflationary increases for the different products that they use in terms of software, and also their compliance activities with our federal, state, and local environmental health and safety laws, and also improving our safety by upgrading our roof access ladders in some of our buildings where we found they're deficient, so those will be replaced. Again, that's over $1 million budget, but not too large of an increase for fiscal year 23.
Quick question on that
Yeah.
too. Is there a consideration, and I know that there are some latter slides that we're going to hear later about health and all that piece, but are there any COVID considerations in this section?
That'll come under another budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Custodial services, that one of the things we're implementing is, uniforms for all of our team members, raising that level of professionalism. There's also some equipment and software applications that we're trying to use for safety training for those folks outside of our environmental health and safety. Inventory management, doing a better job of tracking what we're using at buildings. Also, replacement of some equipment that's beyond its useful life. There's a variety of equipment and custodial services that we need to replace, and also additional professional development above and beyond some of the other areas that I previously described. In utilities, again, we're developing partnerships regarding conservation, and we're looking to identify additional enhancements and energy efficiency projects for our buildings. That's their primary responsibility. Now, in terms of purchasing, we have to replace our postal machine. That needs to be upgraded. That's about a $14,000 increase. But purchasing manages all of our solicitations. We are implementing a standard solicitation process and also improving our vendor management strategies. And there was a national purchasing organization that did an audit and a report, which we actually turned over to the internal auditor's office, and we'll be working through those recommendations as well to improve the operation of our purchasing department.
Does that include the procurement side?
That is the procurement.
No.
Separate from LEDE.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
where I was going with
Yes.
LEDE. Thank you.
Got it. Printing and duplicating just manages our, whole range of printing for the district. There's a small increase there, but we are looking at expanded services, how we can improve services for the district in that area. All right, in terms of those safety items that you talked about, those are actually in our warehouse inventory. And, this year we actually used the services provided from the Educational Service Center to get a lot of those KN95 masks and sanitizers from the ESC from the state of Ohio. But for this upcoming year, we also will manage and store and distribute not only textbooks and supplies, but also PPE. So they're purchased, through the purchasing department, and then they're warehoused and then delivered. One of the increases here is about $49,000 for delivery tracking software, so we can be better at determining where items are in that whole supply chain. Speaking of delivery services, our logistics department involved in replacing some of our fleet. Also some moves of administrative offices which they handle, particularly in this building since it was purchased, and we've been moving people around, and also replacing some older furniture, loaner furniture for different departments. That's pretty much it for logistics service. Safety and security, that's another one. So of course, they maintain and monitor our alarms in our buildings. We're looking at updating our camera and surveillance systems to more digital systems, because some of the older systems in our building do not provide high quality images when we need that evidence if something happens. We're also looking at additional access card readers throughout the district. There's going to be in HR, when I get to that one, a badge update service or update on our badges, employee badges. So we'll be talking about that with safety and security in terms of the readers for those badges. Human resources. One of the increases in this budget has to do with legal services that'll be required for negotiations that'll be coming up. But again, their big focus on recruitment of school leaders, teachers, in high need content areas. Minority candidates are prioritized. In terms of that upgrade for badges, that's included here in terms of the physical badges that they process, improving our HR processes. One of the issues that we've had is working with the CFO's office and our IT department and our Munis system in terms of making sure that we're getting the data out of it that we need in terms of position management. So when someone's hired, you don't have to use different systems to track those employees. So that's all part of the budget that's helping us with our HR department. And next to last but not least, outreach services. Of course, looking at getting more minority contractors into the system. Now, I haven't proposed adding staff yet this year. I have a bunch of other things I need to handle, but I'll be working with her in terms of how we can improve our outreach services, particularly in advance of us looking at doing more with permanent improvements and the potential for a facility master plan project. And then last but not least, my office as deputy superintendent. I'm not really going to say much about that. Some of the budgets I inherited from the previous deputy superintendent, but there's no increase for my budget. It's really, we'll do some training for professional conferences and basically office supplies and memberships. Any questions?
All right, seeing that there aren't any, thank you again, Dr. James, Dr. Schlorenbach, for getting us this far through your.
All right.
I have one.
Oh, Mr. Brown.
I just wanted to give you a heads up. The board now has a subcommittee that will be looking specifically at purchasing and specific at LEDE. Among other things, we're meeting for the first time Thursday, and we'll keep you posted, but it may make sense for you to have somebody touch base with us periodically.
Thank you. Will do.
Even if they're a person that could actually help staff it.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wortman.
Good afternoon. I'll be giving the budget request for the Department of Communications and Engagement. And so for the first one is 915 family engagement. There we go. So this budget includes district-wide and building-level family engagement efforts, including our nationally recognized Family Ambassador Program, which we did expand this year through ESSER funds. It also includes funding for our bilingual engagement liaisons through ETSS that do outreach to support our new American and immigrant families. And the requested increase for FY23 covers the additional cost of the bilingual engagement liaison program that will no longer be covered by the City of Columbus Recovery Act Fund. 937 is an engagement, specifically student and employee engagement initiatives, including the superintendent student ambassadors. The big part of this budget are contracts for communities and schools and city year. But this budget also supports our virtual family engagement sessions and volunteer and outreach opportunities and professional development staff support. 938 is our general communications budget. The big thing here is our Blackboard bundle. So this handles our website, our mobile app, the auto dialer and email system, and our ADA compliance tool for our website. So that's the big piece of that budget. Same request from last year. It also includes paid advertising that we use to help scale our message to a broader audience. Next one is 939 community engagement. And this is used to be the customer relations specific budget that was primarily used for supplies for that office. But now the customer relations is under our new Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships. This is the budget increase to support those community engagement events and initiatives that we're starting to hold this year and will continue to hold in the coming years as well. It also includes support for our customer relations office, which supports board meetings and connects with all the stakeholder concerns and questions that come in. And our final one is 971 Media Tech as our audio-visual production budget. They support our public and employee engagement with video, online, social media, video conferencing. They support board and committee meetings with live streaming through Zoom and Facebook and YouTube. And they also support our online broadcasting, live streaming of our high school graduation. Those are the budgets for communications and engagement.
Any questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Wortman.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Blue.
Good afternoon, Chair Cole. Long time no see. Good afternoon, members of the board or members of the committee. The Department of Equity has additional FY23 funding requests for 2 OPUs to present to you today. The first is for, am I doing this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Goes right
The
there.
first is for the Office of Social Emotional and Student Support Services. As you may know, this area is composed of school counselors, social workers, and other social emotional support services. In the summer of 2021, 17 school counselors were added through ESSER funds to provide support for the growing needs of our schools and programs. In the coming year, we would like to continue to strengthen the knowledge base and skill set of the additional counseling staff as well as the entire counseling roster by adding training with Hatching Results, who will provide technical assistance and training for counselors on an evidence-based national school counseling model and standards. Other training areas would include ethics, implicit bias, trauma-informed care, and restorative practices. Building capacity for the school counseling team will also include purchasing counseling curriculum materials, intervention resources, software, and other technology needed to support the additional roster of counselors. Building capacity in this way will allow us to better meet the needs of both our strategic priority areas of a whole child focus and equitable opportunities for all, as well as guardrails 1 and 2. Requests for this OPU reflect an increase of $172,769. The second request is related to the equity division of the department. As you can see, we've asked for a slight increase in funding, which is related to an increase in teacher staff professional development and consulting services to provide equity work around the district, the refinement of equity training modules, the administration of cultural assessments, as well as other technical assistance to support both guardrails 3 and 4 and strategic priority areas 1 and 2. Our expectation is to create more opportunities for teachers, staff, leaders, and other administrators to learn and grow related to diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. Finally, because the equity department is currently still emerging, there will be additional costs associated with increasing the capacity, content knowledge, and cohesion of the department. The current request will allow our department to better meet that demand. Thank you for your consideration.
All right. Any questions for Dr. Blue and Equity? Thank you again for that presentation. Once again, I'm glad that we are showing a considerable investment and, deep attention to this work in equity and ensuring that this is something that's a long-lasting aspect of not only our interest, but also our character as an organization. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
right. Good afternoon, Mr. Barnes.
Good evening, committee members.
Good evening.
The Office of General Counsel is of course the legal representative of both the district and the board. We provide advice to both entities. You also know that the district relies heavily on property taxes, and we work together closely with outside counsel to ensure that the district receives all the revenues that it is entitled to. Other things that the Office of General Counsel does is we ensure compliance with federal and state anti-discrimination laws, and internally we also investigate discrimination claims within the district. We also review and approve all contracts that are coming before the board. And on an annual basis, we're internally reviewing approximately 1,000 plus contracts a year. Effective on January of this year, we also brought in a policy analyst to assist us with the review and evaluation of board policies and some of our departmental policies and procedures. You will see that there is an increase for fiscal year 23, and that increase involves 3 specific areas. Those areas are professional and technical services, where we are retaining outside counsel to assist the district in court litigation. The second area are claim costs. The third area, and this is really a biggie, property insurance. And there is an increase in property insurance, and it's not because of the hazards of the district, but it's because of an impact on nationwide disasters. If there's a forest fire in California, it hits us here from a premium standpoint. If there's a flood, it hits us here. If it's an earthquake, it hits us here. So we anticipate those costs, those premium costs, to continue to go even higher.
Interesting.
That's all I got.
Are there any questions?
Just briefly, on the first of the 3 items, I want to make sure I heard you right, because I don't think I did. You want to have additional funds for court litigation. Was that by hiring somebody on staff, or was that by hiring outside counsel?
Oh, no, outside counsel.
Okay,
Outside counsel.
that's fine. I just wasn't sure if I heard you accurately. I heard about the court litigation, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Madam Auditor.
Good evening, Chairman Coe and members of the Finance Committee. I'm assuming that my budget will be hitting the screen here shortly. Great, thank you. As you can see, the Office of Internal Audit is requesting a slight increase of approximately $6,000, which represents around 3% of our budget from last year. And the primary driver of this increase is due to an increase in staffing. We were very fortunate to be able to increase our department by 2 FTEs, so we can assist the departments as they go about doing the important work of helping our students. As you kind of heard throughout the presentation, there's been references to the work that internal audit is doing with various departments. So most of this increase is due to just the resources that will be needed to provide the staff with the professional development that they need, and the supplies and various other things that come along with an increase in personnel. As you can see, we didn't spend as much as we had asked for last year, because we are still doing a lot of our conferences and whatnot virtually. So therefore, the increase is primarily driven through the increase in our staff. Very small budget, but there you have it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Madam Auditor? All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Brown, or good evening.
Chair Cole, members of the board and the community, pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you about 946 strategic performance. This budget has a modest increase this year, the majority of which is associated with incremental adjustments to costs for contracts based on inflation, year-to-year inflation. There are three main buckets to this budget. The first, again, is continued support of our K-12 assessment initiative. We're talking initiatives. We're speaking about gifted identification and college and career readiness, the PSAT and SAT work. We're also providing additional support for analytic and statistical software for our staff to use, including SAS, SPSS, and Esri, which allows us to do geospatial planning and reporting. And we're also doing partnerships. You all recently approved the Harvard Strategic Data Project. So again, a partnership with research. We're building research and evaluation capacity here so that we can have stronger data-informed decision-making processes as we move forward. Relatively small budget and not really much of a change from last year. And I'd be happy to address any questions.
Are there any questions? I have just one quick one. What do you see as ultimately your impact on student outcomes and being able to articulate that to us, you know, particularly in alignment with what the state is asking?
So I believe very strongly that the work around the board's data governance process will lead to improved student achievement. And the work of my department really is a service to support that work and to have that information both to the board, but also all the way down to individual students in the individual buildings as well. So it's that parallel process from the board all the way down to the classroom, making sure that we're all speaking about the same data, monitoring in a continuous improvement process as we move forward.
Thank you so much, good sir. Dr. Klein, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Cole and Finance Committee members for the opportunity to share with you the request for the Student Services budget for fiscal year 23. We'll start off first with OPU 930. That's our Health, Family, and Community Services. The 930 budget truly gives our professional nurses the supplies they need to help our students function from a health perspective at school. The majority of all the health services, student services budgets will support our board guardrail with regard to the whole child focus, hence the name of our department, Student Services. The 957 student activities and athletic budget. The 957 budget supports replacement of all outdated athletic equipment. Another good example that we are working on is the replacement of the football field at Eastmore Academy, which was destroyed earlier this year by the army worms. 967 community schools.
Can I ask a quick question, Dr.
Oh,
Klein?
sure. Yes, sir. Please.
In this particular slide deck, you talk about feasibility of affording these capital improvements. Can you give us an indication of what do you mean by feasibility?
Sure. So just like the replacement of Eastmore Academy football field, it's going to take a lot more money than we have. So the feasibility is such that we have to share that with our building and grounds department. And so we're working on that together to make sure that we can service that field so that it will be ready for next fall.
And
is that the grass or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We had an army worm attack this year. Some of you might know about that.
Yes. Question to Treasurer Bahorik. Does some of this translate to the capital side, obviously?
And that's a question that's running through my mind because we've heard quite a few items along the way that could translate into getting out of the general fund and over into capital, depending upon how all the facilities folks want to coordinate that effort.
Chair Cole, if that can be paid for in that manner, I will give you a super virtual hug.
Hey, let's do that. So let's make the connection right here. You guys become
Hey.
friends. Thank you so much so far.
Thank you.
Dr. Klein and I are friends. Rest assured.
We have very similar philosophical values with regard to community schools, which is my next topic. So community schools 967, I'm sure you can see by the dramatic change in money requested from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 23. This is due to a change in how community schools are currently reported and funded and charged. We are proposing to move this OPU to 968. So let's go to 968. Or do you want to say something, Scott?
No, it's these were expenses that I guess have been part of this budget before, but they're not community schools. There's a small segment that's still there. So we're just trying to figure out which OPU this should reside in. These are tuition payments for students that are being served in state institutions and residential and facilities that we're required to. So we're just trying to find out the right spot for that.
And they're a little bit
whether we
different.
rename the OPU or just move it into out of district. So we're just working.
They're a little different than the out-of-state tuition that I'm going to share with you next in 968. So 968, these required costs are payment for educational organizations that are educating our Columbus City school students due to required services that we cannot fiscally house, for special education, for mental health, for court-ordered placements, all these different examples. I want to give you some names so that you can think about what these institutions are. They're places like Ability Matters, Briar Patch, Dublin Springs, the Educational Service Center, the Juvenile Intervention Center, or JIC, Hogland, and Ventures Academy. We have about 112 of them, but I just wanted to give you a taste for who they were. 973, our student services budget. I want to share with you one of the very exciting new modules for our students that we piloted during summer school prior to the pandemic. We will finish our pilot with Region 6 starting next week, and we'll implement region by region in the 2022-23 school year. This module is called the Student Success Card through our campus workflow. This is a multifunction card for our students. The use of this success card will improve attendance accuracy, efficiency, by letting school staff know when and where students are in a building. Students will be able to scan their success cards when arriving late or leaving early. This will eliminate long lines, especially in those high schools, in the morning, and the need for paper logs. This will also allow us to use scanners throughout the building, including hallways, counselors' offices, nurse's office, or any other location an administrator chooses. We will be able to turn on a feature in the parent portal, allowing parents to submit absence requests ahead of time so school staff can process earlier for planned absences. As if all that isn't enough, remember the barcode on this ID, which is right here, and I'm going to pass this around for you, is an automatic Columbus Metropolitan Library card which supports our district reading goal. In addition, the QR code on the front allows our pre-K through 5 students to hold up the card to the camera on their computer and automatically log them in. Our summer school teachers who used this feature felt that this saved enormous amount of time and effort for our elementary children. And lastly, the Success Card has an RFID chip inside of it. This will allow our students to scan in and off the school buses for safety and location checks for our transportation department. This will also allow you to have immediate reports. This chip will also be used in our campus-style location, such as Fort Hayes, with building entry for our students in various buildings during class changes. And one last thing. This is going to allow us to bill for transportation of our special needs students through Medicare. This amount of savings is estimated to be $350,000. Our safety and security, transportation, talent management, leadership, legal, communication, and academic departments have teamed together to make this multifunctional card work for all. At this time, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, and I am going to pass this badge around.
Question?
Well, we'll go Mr. Brown, then we'll go Mr. Green.
A brief question with respect to the card, and that's intriguing. Will it be monitoring movement passively? Or will a student need to take it out and actually scan it for all of those various functions and tools?
Correct. So the
So if they
student
get
will
on and
need
off-
to scan it. Yes.
Okay. Fine.
Yes,
That-
sir.
Yeah, that answers it. I thought perhaps for some of those things we would want.
We will get there one day, Dr. Brown.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Mr. Green?
What's the replacement cost for those cars when they get lost?
So great question. We are working with our card integrator vendor right now. It's approximately $1.32, but we are continuously working on that. And because we'll be going with a much larger bulk print next year, when we do, all of our students, it will change the cost dramatically.
Thank you for that question, because that was one that immediately came to mind for me
Sure.
as well. So thank you
Safety
for
and
this
security is
presentation.
pretty excited about this card.
We should see the savings, though, on reprints via that Medicaid side of things,
Oh,
correct?
big time. The other thing, Board Chair Cole, is that for identification purposes, World Language Middle School, they were the first ones to come up to me and say, hey, we need these for our kids because they don't have IDs to do things, and they don't speak our English tongue. And so even though they're not in Region 6, when we bring on the Medicaid schools in about 4 weeks, we'll be bringing world language in as well.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you for this. This is a major piece for us. This is a carryover of a countywide conversation that was had
Correct.
a couple years back.
And keep in mind, I'm still in negotiations with CODA because I hope to actually, when they upgrade their system, Board Chair Cole, they're going to use an RFID chip, and that's already embedded in that card.
Awesome. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, one additional question that occurs to me, and I guess because of the Buckeye ID card, it's used also as a benefit for students to get discounts at a lot of retailers and places. Has there been discussion about that yet?
There is not, Board Member Brown, but I'll tell you what, I'll make sure I work with our equity department and see if maybe there isn't an opportunity for us to spread that out into the community, because they or the communications department might have a really good idea for that. So thank you for that suggestion, sir.
No, I would think that benefiting our students in those ways would make it even more likely that they'd carry them. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair Cole,
Yes.
before she steps away, this is somewhat related, but this project I'm highly confident will be implemented because who's standing at the podium? You might be aware that this year we went to a online ticketing system at our and cashless system at our sporting events, and that happened within about 2 weeks of Dr. Klein being assigned that responsibility for that area. So we were really excited about having that happen, and I believe it's worked extremely well. So.
Yes, sir. Treasurer Bohoric, I actually thank your department for that idea. I was shared that information on one day, and within 48 hours we had the wheels moving, and our athletic directors are actually thrilled now and are very excited that they don't have to worry about keeping cash in their buildings. So thank you.
Thank you for helping us solve a big problem, especially with the state audit.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Okay, next up to bat, Dr. Dixon.
Hi, good evening, everyone. For the superintendent, board chair Cole, and members of the committee, for the superintendent budget, we have some increases I'd like to highlight. We have increase in our operational expenses due to the Office of the Superintendent absorbing board services and bringing over 2 additional staff members. In addition, we added executive director's position. So you see those positions listed. Additional funds are going to be needed for memberships and travel costs and professional development opportunities for those staff members. And that's in budget 902. and budget OPU 925, improvement and innovation. We're seeing some ongoing supplemental support for major district initiatives and building and program specific needs. So we use this if we find through any pilots or any studies that we're doing that we want to use some seed costs, seed money to fund some of these initiatives. We have some funds here for reserved. We use these funds sometimes with our student ambassadors programs, or we are using these funds if we want to research something a little further before we bring that to our other departments for further research. And then in number 941, our Board of Education, again, that is under our office now. We then maintain an investment for board professional development and leadership development consistent with state law. So we have those expenditures there. So those, and then board services maintains funds for activities in support of the board. And we see an increase in FY22 represents the cost for the board joining the voucher litigation. Government affairs, which is now, again, is in my office, but policy update services from Neola have moved to legal services. So that's now one of the things that, that Attorney Barnes shared. But we also include state and federal legislative tracking and monitoring our systems. And we have other operational expenses for policy and government affairs. And those are all of the budget items for the superintendent CEO office. Are there any questions from anyone?
All right, thank you, Dr. Dixon. There are no questions.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good evening, Dr. Chapman.
Good evening, Board Member Cole and committee members. It is my pleasure to talk with you this evening about the budget request for the Department of Transformation and Leadership. Our department is responsible for all of the leadership work in the district, as well as the state and federal programs. So the first OPU that I'll share with you is OPU 906. 906 represents our state and federal programs department. This office oversees the compliance and regulatory functions for CCS for over 100 local, state, and federal grants. The work of this team has expanded exponentially, as you can imagine, in the last year and a half due to the increase in pandemic-related funding, also known as ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. The team has also made considerable investments and improvement in our online system called CCS-DAS for tracking our grants electronically, and it also includes all of our conference requests has been moved to online, as well as position allocation. The next OPU is 926, which represents our non-public school supports. This office serves as a fiscal agent for federal and state funds provided to 55 non-public schools in our community. These funds include personnel, textbooks, materials, equipment, and PD. The office is also responsible for supporting the 85 staff members that support the non-public schools, in addition to processing the POs and requisitions for all expenditures. The third OPU for our department is 934. This is our school leadership and development OPU. This OPU supports the work of our school leadership team, which includes all of the area superintendents, the leadership coaches, all of our principals in the district, all of our assistant principals, leadership interns. The funding supports a variety of professional development offerings that are provided to our leaders. It also includes professional memberships and departmental operations, which include mileage, technology, office supplies, and materials. We are very proud of our opportunity to curate more differentiated PD for our school leaders this year because of our budget and the added capacity to our team. So we have now cadres of leaders going through leadership experiences. So if you're a new AP, a new principal, an emerging leader, aspiring leader, instead of moving away from a one-size-fits-all PD experience for all principals, we've been able to tier that support and provide differentiated PD and support for our school leaders. This team has also expanded this year with the addition of a new training and development team, which now consists of 5 team members who provide on-the-job training to all classified staff members in CCS. So overall, the work of this department and the 3 OPUs represented here certainly is aligned to the work of our strategic plan and is in support of priority number 3, strong learning communities in every region. Any questions?
Are there any questions, anyone? I just have a very quick one,
Yes.
Dr. Chapman.
Yes.
What is the difference? I found it interesting that PAR wasn't included in your side of things. What is the thought process behind the distinction? It's not a hill to die on or anything like that. It's just a point of interest for me.
Absolutely. So my office supports all of the leaders. So we support whether you're a new principal, new AP, aspiring leaders. We even have a cohort of professional learning for emerging leaders. They're thinking about applying for a leadership role. But the PAR program is in our professional learning and licensure program because it's also tied to the licensure program for teachers. But all of our our supports for our certificated staff, particularly teachers, that's found in the professional learning and licensure team. Now, our departments certainly work well together, and as I was sitting here thinking about the presentation, I was like, well, leadership should be right after academics because we're kind of tied at the hip. So, yes, that's a great question, but the teacher-facing work and the work for supporting our teachers as it relates to PAR is in professional learning and licensure underneath academic services.
Thank you so much for that point of clarification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Treasurer.
Good evening.
Good evening. Again.
Again, yes. There are a couple of OPUs under the Treasurer's Office. The first one, 903, the ESC contract, the Educational Service Center contract. This is funded at about $6.50 per pupil and is a deduction from our state aid and goes over to fund our portion of the comprehensive contract with the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. That contract is right around $1 million, so we contribute $330, and through this arrangement, we can contract through them for a variety of services and get to spend about $1 million over there. And that stays with us. If we don't spend it, it carries over to the next year, but we should spend that year to year. But this is just a deduct from the foundation, goes to them, and then various academic services and other areas in schools contract with the ESC for services. The next one is my main budget, and we've rolled, since the budget department came over to us, we rolled their small budget into this area as well. The bulk of this, 92% of the expenditures here of the over $50 million requested is for county auditor and treasurer fees and the debt service transfers that we do. Those amount to well over $14 million of the $15 million that's in the budget. So it's really a non-discretionary, mandatory type of expense that is contained in my budget. I would point out, if you look at the FY21 expended, you see $92 million, and that was because of the $80 million bus transfer. Other than that, slight increases. Fees go up every year. Again, but the bulk of it is consumed by those outside fees. That's it for my office.
All right. Are there any questions? All right.
And the last slide is just summarizing all of these requests together in one table for the committee's viewing pleasure, I guess. So you'll see all the chiefs listed them out by OPU. We brought each one together as a grand total. So you'll see once we get through this, obviously there'll be the changes for the capital improvement slides that we talked about earlier. This will become the basis for the 5-year forecast update that Treasurer Bajorek will bring to the board, bring to FAC, go through that in March, and then bring that to the board, in April. and then bring that to the board for approval in May. So the next phase after this will be the same folks coming through next month and giving you an update on the general fund personnel side, the staffing plan for FY23, and then all those two pieces will come together, and that's what will fit into the 5-year forecast that Treasurer Bohoric will present to you.
All right, thank you so very much. I do appreciate that. When I saw that in the slide deck, I love how it just brought it all together, so I appreciate that. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, just, I have one question. And I guess as I look at this page and look just at the bottom line, after all of these presentations, it appears when I look at the bottom line to be lots more fluctuation than I had focused on during each presentation, going from almost 383 million spent actual to a much smaller budget for 22, and then increasing again significantly, but less than it had been. I mean, on a macro level, how do you explain that?
Two quick items. One, charter school deduction is out, 200 million. $80 million transfer for buses is out. So that you can take 280 million out like that out of the 21 actuals, because those aren't accounted for. So that number is probably closer to a little over 100,000, which budgeted to 134,000, which then climbs to 223. So the difference between 134, that about, what is that, about $90 million climb was what they were explaining in terms of all the individual things that they're going to add in terms of what their services are.
That's helpful, thank you.
Because those community school deductions were there in 21, but we made that modification this year, so that's why you don't see it in 22.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Thank you all. Then we can move on to the monthly financial report, Mr. Treasurer.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the financial report for January. This is a report I will, and that's interesting, I need to change this slide because it's being reported to you, but it will not be reported to the board. It'll be given to the board for acceptance and approval, but there will be no formal presentation. As you recall, I'm going to a quarterly presentation. That next quarterly presentation will be in May. So I'll need to update this slide. For the month, revenues in January were about $19 million under plan, about 17%, and that's primarily due to the offsetting variances in property taxes and state aid, which I'll get to in a minute, and expenditures were $168 million under plan, or I'm sorry, yeah, at that's about 0.3%. Year to date, the revenue stands about 6% below plan, and total expenditures are just 0.5% under plan. Actually, I think expenditures were 168,000 under plan for the month. So very much on target on expenditures. Cash balance, 305 million was about 26 million under plan. When we delve into the revenues, property taxes came in 46 million below plan so far, and that we're receiving advances right now. So if we don't get them in January, we'll get them in February, kind of a thing. So that's just timing. This month, state aid formula was in place, and they began making payments based upon the new formula. Took them a couple of payments, I think, to kind of figure it out, get the data right, get the formula right. And in keeping with how the state funds you, when there are changes, they do a true-up on the revenue side, so they give you kind of a large catch-up payment, if you will, if you're owed money as a result of the change in the calculation. But if something goes down, they spread that reduction out over numerous months. So you tend to get a bump up front, and then things get smoothed out over the year. So it's to your benefit. In other words, they give you that bump in revenue, but if it's a reduction in some line item, then they spread that reduction out over time so you don't have a cash flow issue. I've taken a look at the February 1 payment, and in the MD&A I discussed that a little bit, but the February 1 payment appears to be kind of more normal and on track under the new formula. I took a look at that and spread that out for the balance of the year, looked at our actual amounts that we have in the plan, and it looks like I'm going to be pretty close, within about 2.8 to 3 million. Probably a little bit under what the plan calls for, but that's a pretty good result, given we had the new formula. We didn't really know what it was going to look like. We were relying on LSC estimates, and we're still figuring out certain pieces. A very large variable in the new funding formula is now student enrollment, and we're looking at that very closely. Just as an example, back in 2020, we were being funded on an enrollment number, and we're looking into what that means. You know, is it butts and seats? Is it FTE of students? How's it really calculated? Heretofore, quite frankly, I didn't pay any attention to it because it didn't impact funding. It just didn't. We were capped. Now we're paying very, very close to it. So in 20, it looks like the number is around 46,000 students. Currently, the number in the formula is 43,000. So we're like, all right, let's figure this out as to what the kids that we're teaching, how does that translate into how the funding number works. So we're not there yet, but we're going to be delving into that here very soon. I just had a sidebar comment in the hallway with Dr. Brown, so he's very interested in it. My side's very interested, and then we've got the enrollment folks that are very interested in making sure that we know how that data flows and its ultimate impact on funding.
You have a board that's absolutely concerned with that as well, and more, in fact, how we recapture. We build back up to what we were just 6 years ago at 52,000 students. But thank you.
Mm-hmm. Looking at all other revenues, you'll see that they net to about 2.6 million above plan. That's led by pilots, those payments in lieu of taxes at 3.1 million year to date over plan. And in the other categories, there's no real activity this past month. Moving on to expenditures, 2 million below plan for the year. In personnel, kind of interesting, we were within 168,000 of plan on about 40 some million in expenditures. So we're not that precise. We'd rather be lucky than good sometimes. So, but we were very much on plan for the month, and that meant that their year-to-date variance was relatively unchanged at about the 8.4 million below plan. Non-personnel, under plan this month, 192,000, took that year-to-date variance to about 6.1 million above plan. And you can see on this next slide that's spread between a variety of categories, ranging from 4 million over plan to 3.4 million under plan. There's nothing there that is significant enough to warrant a big change in the 5-year forecast, which is what we're really comparing to here. So all in all, I think expenditures in the aggregate are very much on plan. Revenue is going to figure itself out. Property taxes will continue to be advanced in February and March. I expect settlement in late March, early April, so we'll know how that works out by April. And then we'll watch state aid. I expect state aid, because of how I plan for it month to month and then what I think is going to be coming in, we should run under plan a bit. We're 11 million over plan year to date. We should eat away at that and then come in at that plus or minus a couple $1 million by the end of the year. So it's all good. We'll get a handle on what that enrollment number is, and we'll get back to everybody on that and see what that means for how we manage things around to that enrollment.
Any questions thus far before we close out? I just have one, and then we can. It's relative to the supplies. Are we seeing this over plan of 4 million plus in supplies due to COVID, due to excessive purchase of PPE, other materials? Is that attributed to this at all? Or?
I can't say that is in fact the cause. I attribute it more to just the timing and the behavior. When we set up the plan, it's based upon how that's been spent over the last 5 or 6 years. And so if we spend it a little bit faster this year than we have in the past, then that or there are spikes in supply purchases, then that's going to indicate that we're over plan year to date. One of the things, I'm trying to remember if I still included in the MD&A, one of the things that we do want to look at is what is our revised budget for supplies. I do that for capital outlay. You know, capital outlay has a very large revised budget versus what's in the plan, so that indicates to me that we've transferred money perhaps into those line items, and that therefore we might run over plan, but that transfer had to come from somewhere else that would reduce it, the budget somewhere else. So in part, you know, the even longer answer to your question is, I don't think it's necessarily anything behavioral. I think it's more in terms of how the plan spread those dollars out over the year. But I will look at the budget and see if there's an indication that, you know, if we have a revised budget larger than the annual plan dollar, then it's likely that we would exceed the plan in that category.
Okay, so a zero-based approach to this is in order or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you can see, if I go back one.
And this is only an example of other types of, overages and expenditures.
As you see that let's say that the revised budget differences will explain it. So if you're over in one category, you'll be under in another because you've had to move budget around. We'll take a look at that. It hasn't been a large enough dollar amount to attract a whole lot of attention. But generally speaking, if we're moving budgets around, that can cause those variances.
Yeah, I just see that as a barometer.
Yep.
In an odd kind of way. I just see it as a barometer. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I mean, most folks would say in our world that this is kind of budget dust. Mm-hmm. But for me, just looking at that, I get a sense that that's a barometer for something.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I thank you guys. If there aren't any questions or comments, anyone? All right.
Objection to adjourn.
Okay. Is there a motion? There's been a motion to adjourn? And there's a second. All in favor, we're ready to go. Thank you all so much, very much for today. Thank you for those who are viewing, for those who participated in today's meeting, for giving an outstanding presentation. We look forward to the implications and positive progressive impacts on student achievement that this will hold for us. We look forward to seeing you. God bless you.
Training.